Thank you for visiting this limited series. The infection was initially mild, my small town city council run, the toxic American pandemic response, and what both mean for the future of the country, written by Heather Christina Schmidt. You can view the entire series now on schmidttalks.com or subscribe to get it sent in parts to your email box weekly.
We are divided into districts, and in my district there is a special brand of nonpartisan voters that decide every single election. During the campaign, I precinct walked my entire district, flyering and door hanging, only because of the pandemic, and I cannot think of a single street that was absent a Trump 2020 flag. Each election, both of the major political parties seem to claim these non-par voters as their own, but the truth is they are the anti-establishment and anti-party voters who like Trump because he wasn't your normal politician. This view has not changed for them, in spite of all the chaos that comes with it. In truth, I only needed around 4,800 votes, plus one. My district, in fact my entire county, has had a static presidential election year voter turnout around 80%. With only one other opponent in a race that is albeit easier to win when there are several options, 50% of that plus one would still win me my race. As it turned out, likely due to many people in my district being conservative and or pro-Trump, but knowing that in California this would be a waste of a vote, we only had a 67% voter turnout, and of that I only turned out 22% of them. A wet noodle of a result, if you ask me. On the larger scale, my county is nestled in a more conservative swath of Southern California. It would be generous to call it purple. Here we have a lot of elected officials that are even branded as Democrats, and I believe they're just so ineffectual and dysfunctional, the Republicans won't even take them. A great example of this is my state assemblywoman. Originally a city council member in a neighboring town, this woman uses the Democratic Party like my ex-boyfriend that used me for rides to school. She has less interest in the Democrats or social justice, or any of their claimed causes and policy positions, than probably the Libertarians do, and yet she runs us one time and again. To be honest, it isn't even exclusive to how she uses the Democratic Party, either. She uses closely aligned racial and cultural groups too, with zero interest in truly advocating for them. During the election I ran, she was at a candidates event I attended hosted by the local Islamic Center. In response to the question on what she intended to do to fight Islamophobia in and around the community, her response was, "I don't know, but I always like your food." When she decided to run for state legislature, she was pretty handily elected. A just to the right of the center Democrat in a red pantsuit is what I like to call her. Even further evidence to this conservative underpinning is not only in her voting record, but the fact that out the door she endorsed my opponent, a right-wing Republican, described by some in the community as a miniature Donald Trump, miniature in scope of office, and just because he is really a small, very small man. In the presidential elections, we usually go about 60% to the Democratic nominee, and last year was no different. However, every other race down the ballot, from governor to water board, is more of a mixed bag. Our local elections are nonpartisan, but this is neither a genuine designation, nor an accurate reflection of what powers control our grassroots community initiatives. The political party affiliation is either quietly known, or something people are overtly aware of. There is rarely an in-between. The average voter though doesn't even know that our local elections are technically nonpartisan. This is something I learned fairly early on in the campaign. I did manual texting until the very end, and an explanation for my voters about what nonpartisan meant, and how our city council seats were technically run in that manner, was needed so frequently that I ended up creating a note in my campaign phone that I could copy and paste it from. Just because you run non-par, though, never meant you actually had to be non-par. My opponent and I both took endorsements, and money, from our respective political parties. Him the GOP, I the Democrats. The thing I failed to get out ahead on, though, perhaps one of my earliest failings, was that in reality I'm politically all over the place. The Democrats just sort of fit at the time. In truth, I disagree with both the Democrats and the Republicans more often than I agree with them. At the end of the day, my opponent again masterfully manipulated my own messaging to portray me as a leftist radical that would turn our city into one where people were shackled by socialism, forced to wear burlap sacks and live in a communal shanty while paying allegiance daily to a dark Stalin-esque overlord. While he signed a fair campaign promise to not smear his opponent, he told people I, his opponent, just a mom, wanted to defund our police department and turn the city into a crime-ridden cesspool. This was my second major failing, as I did when I first got into politics out of college. I lived on my own fantasy island where people had educated political and philosophical discussions, and then chose candidates based upon whose ideas made the most sense. And that people that agreed to fair campaign practices campaign fairly. Stuck in my esoteric realm of academia and childish naivety, I let him control my message with his rumors and identity politics before even making my first campaign appearance. This failure of mine, and masterful manipulation of his, was even displayed on his signs. He was the independent and loyal candidate, I the partisan hack with a secret agenda. Never mind the fact that he contracted with a local political consulting company that is exclusively by and for Republicans, and I hardly had the support of any local Democrats, the party simply endorsing me, I assume, because of an absence of any other options. None of this mattered, because most voters barely even knew there were local elections going on, let alone had the sense to check his campaign contribution filings to see who he was sending money to for the management of his campaign. Nevertheless, when he and I were in front of our largest audience, the 55 and over neighborhood located in the center of our district, he manipulated the elderly by telling them that he was independent and loyal while I was a part of a Democratic conspiracy to sneak my way into local public office. I sat in disbelief, in the same way I sit in disbelief when I think about the entire candidacy today, as he said right into the camera for these Bettys and Berts to watch on their closed-circuit television station. And while I moved to correct this glaring lie immediately, it was clear that the damage was done. They never hear the truth, they only hear what was said first. In any event, I ran. I lost. The decision to do so was precipitous, my family and I still feeling the disastrous social consequences of the choice. Here I am, more than a year later. I learned a lot of lessons, but more importantly I am still left, in many ways, bewildered that I did the thing at all, that it was real and serious and, most importantly, resulted in the most eye-opening and lesson-filled year of my entire life. Remember that time I ran for city council? To be honest, I'm not sure I could forget.
Keep going to continue. The infection was initially mild, my small town city council run, the toxic American pandemic response, and what both mean for the future of the country, written by Heather Christina Schmidt, or come back next week for the next installation on schmidttalks.com. Thank you to our sponsors, and subscribers like you. Stay healthy, stay safe, stay aware.